Many of us have had to learn the hard way. Saying no is difficult when you got a good heart. It's difficult when you care about people. It's difficult when somebody genuinely needs you. It is difficult when you know you can help. Because some of us have been taught that being a good Christian means always being available. If somebody calls, answer. If somebody needs something, give it. If somebody asks, go. If there's a problem, fix it. And before long, you are carrying everybody else's problems, responding to everybody else's emergencies, trying to meet everybody else's expectation. And somewhere along the way, you have become so busy doing what everybody else wants that you no longer have time to do what God called you to do. And that's what makes this text uncomfortable for us. Jesus had to deal with that also. In Mark 1, it gives us one of the busiest days recorded in the early ministry of Jesus. Jesus has recently been baptized. He has faced Satan in the wilderness, and he has begun preaching the gospel of the kingdom. He has called Simon, Andrew, James, and John, and now he comes into Capernaum. Mark's gospel moves fast. One of Mark's favorite words is immediately or straight away. He uses those words over 100 times in his gospel. Jesus is constantly moving from one situation to another. And beginning in verse 21, Jesus has what we might call a full day of ministry. That morning he gets up, he teaches in the synagogue. While there, he cast out a demon. After service, he leaves the synagogue, goes to Simon's house. He heals Simon's mother-in-law. Then the sun goes down and the people start showing up. Verse 32 says, they brought unto him all that were diseased and them that were possessed with devils. And verse 33 follows saying, and all the city was gathered together at the door. Can you see this picture? The whole city is standing outside. Everybody wants something. Everybody needs something. Everybody has somebody who needs Jesus. And Jesus heals. Jesus delivers. Jesus ministers. Jesus gives. And after a long night of pouring himself out, verse 35 tells us, and in the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out. And that's where this sermon really begins. Because Jesus is about to teach us that being needed does not mean you have to always say yes. There will be moments when people want something from you, and that there's nothing wrong with that. They may even need something from you that is legitimate. But you have to know the difference between what they want from you and what God wants from you. And sometimes you have to say no. Now we see here that there's pressure from the people. See, because before we can understand Jesus' no, we have to understand what created the pressure. Jesus is becoming popular. Verse 22 says that they were astonished or amazed at his doctrine, for he taught them as one that had authority and not as the scribes. Jesus doesn't teach like everybody else. See, the scribes interpret the law, but Jesus speaks with authority. He doesn't merely explain the truth, he is the truth. And the people recognize that something is different about him. Then while Jesus is teaching, a man with an unclean spirit cries out. And Jesus says, hold thy peace and come out of him. And the demon has to obey. And the people in verse 27 says, what thing is this? Because they have never seen authority like this. So we understand that his word has authority in the sanctuary. But Jesus didn't stop there. It says that they were also amazed by Jesus' touch. Jesus leaves the synagogue and goes home with Simon and Andrew. Simon Peter's mother-in-law is sick with a fever. They tell Jesus about her. And verse 31 says, and he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Yeah, I like that. See, Jesus just does not just deal with demons in the synagogue. He also will deal with fevers in a house. Sometimes we think God is only concerned about big things. But if you're a child of God, if it concerns you, you can bring it to him. And the same Jesus who has authorities over demons has authority over disease. The same Jesus who can handle what is happening publicly can handle what is hurting you privately. He takes her hand, raises her up. The fever leaves her body. And she begins serving. But word starts spread. Verse 28 tells us immediately his fame spread abroad throughout all the region about Galilee. And by sundown, there is a crowd at the door. But we see that they were attracted by his power. So now everybody wants Jesus. But here is the problem. I want you to understand that people can want what you can do for them without wanting what God sent you to give them. They love the healing. They love the deliverance. They love the miracles and the benefits. And sometimes people will love what comes out of you without caring about what it cost you. They will keep calling, keep asking, keep needing, keep expecting, not necessarily because they are bad folk. Sometimes they really are hurting. But if you respond to every need, you will eventually have nothing left to give. Am I knocking on somebody's door? Yes, sir. Is anybody here knows what that feels like? You're tired, not because you're lazy. You're tired because everybody has access to you. You have become the person that everybody calls, the one who fixes it, the one who handles it, the one who comes through, the one who holds everybody together. And you keep saying yes because you do not want anybody to think that you just don't care. Amen. But hear me, compassion without boundaries will eventually become exhaustion. Even Jesus did not allow the demands of the crowd to determine the direction of his life. Because when everybody is pulling on you, you need somewhere to go where nobody can get to you but God. That's why I want you to know that there's the priority of prayer. Said verse 35, and in the morning rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there he prayed. Look at Jesus. Yesterday, everybody wanted him. This morning, nobody can find him. Because Jesus understood something. Jesus understood that before you face the demands of people, you need time in the presence of God. So he went out. Jesus intentionally removed himself. And that's important because sometimes you cannot hear God clearly while everybody else is talking. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an expectation. Everybody has an idea about what you ought to do. But there are moments when you have to get away from everybody else long enough to hear God. So Jesus goes to a solitary place. He goes someplace quiet, away from the crowd, away from the applause, away from need, away from expectation. Because you cannot live your entire life surrounded by noise and expect to maintain spiritual direction. So sometimes you have to turn off the television. Put the telephone down. Stop answering every notification and sit somewhere quiet, open your Bible and talk to God. Because if everybody always has access to you, eventually you will lose access to yourself. And more importantly, you may lose sensitivity to the voice of God. Now understand, prayer requires sacrifice. Notice when Jesus prayed, it said, rising up a great while before day. Jesus had been working late. The previous evening, the city was gathered outside the door. Yet Jesus gets up early the next morning. Why does he do that? Because some things are too important to fit into whatever time is left over. We often say, I don't have time to sit and pray about it that long. But maybe the problem is not that we don't have time. Maybe everything else has just been given priority. Jesus shows us that the purpose requires prayer. The busier he became, the more necessary prayer became. His pressure didn't push him away from prayer. It pushed him toward prayer. Some commentary writers regularly identify this with Jesus's strength, in that he spent time in prayer. And because he spent time in prayer, he had the power to fulfill his purpose. And we understand when he came out of prayer, he knew where he was going next. And this is something that prayer will do for you. Prayer will remind you what matters when everything else feels important. Prayer will help you separate the urgent from the essential. Prayer will remind you that I cannot do everything. I cannot fix everybody. I cannot accept every invitation. I cannot meet every expectation. I cannot solve every problem, and I do not have to because I'm not God. Somebody in here needs to hear this today. You are carrying things God never told you to carry. losing sleep over things you cannot control, feeling guilty because you cannot make everybody happy. But maybe the most spiritual thing you can do in some situation is prayer. Get up, pray, get up, and say no. You got to understand the power of purpose. Now, Simon and the others start looking for Jesus. Verse 37 says, and when they had found him, they said unto him, all men seek for thee. Boy, that actually sounds like good news, don't it? Jesus, everybody wants you. The crowd is waiting. The people are asking for you. Come on back in town, back to the house. But then verse 38 shocked me when I slowed down and read it. Jesus says, let us go into the next towns. In other words, no, we're not going back there. We are going forward. And that's because purpose must resist popularity. Everybody is looking for you. Most of us would love to hear that. Everybody wants you. Everybody is talking about you. Everybody wants to hear you. Everybody wants what you have. But Jesus refuses to let popularity become his compass. See, everybody wanting you does not mean God wants you there. Yeah, I believe that'll preach all by itself. See, you got to understand, every open door is not your door. Every invitation is not your assignment. Every opportunity is not God's will. Every person who needs you is not necessarily somebody God assigned you to rescue. And you need to have enough prayer in your life to recognize the difference. Because if you are not careful, people will make their priorities your priorities. Understand, purpose must resist pressure. Notice what Simon said. All men seek for thee. See, there's pressure in that statement. Jesus, people are waiting. Jesus, people are expecting you. Jesus, you cannot disappoint them. But Jesus essentially says, we're leaving. And somebody may need permission today to understand that saying no does not make you mean. Saying no does not mean you don't love people. Saying no does not mean you have stopped caring. Sometimes saying no means I know what God has called me to do. And there are people who will be disappointed when you establish boundaries. There are people who have benefited from you having none. But you cannot sacrifice your health, your peace, your family, your prayer life, your calling, and your relationship with God just to keep everybody satisfied. Sometimes you have to say, no, I cannot come. No, I cannot do that. No, I can't carry that. No, I cannot fix that. No, I cannot keep rescuing you from decisions that you keep making. No, I cannot give you what I do not have. No. And you do not always owe everybody a paragraph explaining it. Jesus didn't hold a committee meeting. He knew his purpose. And your purpose must remember your mission. Jesus says, let us go to the next town that I may preach there also. For therefore came I forth. There it is, y'all. For therefore came I forth. Jesus knew why he came. The miracles mattered. The healing mattered. The people mattered. But the miracles were not allowed to replace the mission. See, Jesus came proclaiming the good news of God's kingdom, and he would not let even legitimate needs confine that mission to only Capernaum. And here's the question. Do you know what God has called you to do? Do you know what God has called you to do? Because when you know your why, it becomes easier to recognize what deserves a no. If God called you to preach, you cannot spend all of your energy trying to please people. If God called you to raise children, you cannot give everybody else the best of you and then give your family only whatever is left. If God gave you an assignment, you can't let other people's expectations pull you away from it. You need to know, what did God send me here to do? Because you cannot say yes to your purpose without saying no to some distractions. Every great yes requires some necessary no's. The piece of proper priorities. Verse 39 says, and he preached in the synagogues throughout all Galilee and cast out devils. Look at what happened. Jesus said no to Capernaum and yes to Galilee. He said no to staying and yes to going. He said no to what everybody wanted and yes to what the Father sent him to accomplish. And because Jesus was willing to leave one crowd, other towns heard the message. And here's what I came to tell somebody. Your no may be protecting a bigger yes. You think you're losing something because you said no, but maybe God is making room for something greater. I want you to know that sometimes a no can protect your peace. You don't have to live exhausted. You don't have to feel guilty every time you cannot meet somebody else's expectation. You don't have to explain yourself to everybody. And sometimes protecting your peace means recognizing that is not mine to carry. Philippians 4 tells us to bring our requests to God and promises that God's peace will guard our hearts and our minds. See, some things you've been worrying about need to be turned over to him. You have done what you can do. Now let God be God. James Cleveland wrote a song. He said, Lord, I've done all I know how to do. Now I'm waiting on you. And you got to be able to identify what is for you to do and what you have to let God do. A no can not only protect your peace, but a no can protect your purpose. Nehemiah understood this. While Nehemiah was rebuilding Jerusalem's wall, Sanballat and Geshem kept calling him to come down and meet with them. Nehemiah answered, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. That is a sanctified no. I cannot come down, not because I think I'm better than you, not because I'm angry, not because I don't care. I cannot come down because I have something God told me to finish. And somebody needs to put that in their spirit. I cannot come down. See, I cannot come down into unnecessary arguments. I cannot come down into everybody else's drama. I cannot come down trying to prove myself. I cannot come down chasing approval. I cannot come down answering every critic. God has given me something to do, and I cannot come down. A no can protect your future. Had Jesus remained in Capernaum simply because everybody wanted him there, what about the next town? And the town after that? And the village after that? Sometimes what is waiting for you tomorrow requires you to say no to something today. There are blessings connected to obedience. There are people connected to your assignment. There are doors farther down the road, and you cannot reach them if you allow everybody else to determine where you stop. So stop feeling guilty because you cannot be everything to everybody. Jesus wasn't. He loved everybody, but he did not let everybody determine his schedule. He cared about everybody, but he did not allow everybody to determine his assignment. He served people, but he remained submitted to the Father. And that is the balance. And when I look at Jesus in Mark chapter 1, I'm glad that he knew why he came. Because Capernaum was not his final destination. Galilee was not his final destination. He kept moving, he kept preaching, and he kept healing. He kept delivering, and he kept going because he knew why he came. He came to seek and save that which was lost. He came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. He came to give his life a ransom for many. And there are plenty of opportunities along the way for Jesus to take an easier road. But Jesus knew when to say no. Satan offered him the kingdoms of the world. Jesus said no. People wanted to make him a king on their own terms. Jesus said no. Paul tried to tell him that suffering and death could never happen to him. Jesus said no. They mocked him at Calvary and said, if thou be the Son of God, come on down from this cross. But thank God, Jesus said no. Ain't God all right? He said, no, I will not come down because there's something bigger happening right here. No, I will not come down because somebody needs redemptive blood from my body. No, I will not come down because somebody's sin has got to be paid for. No, I will not come down because death has got to be defeated. No, I will not come down because the grave has to lose its victory. So he stayed there from the 6th to the 9th hour with nails in his hands, spikes in his feet. He died. He died. He died. He died till the sun refused to shine. He died till the veil of the temple was rent from the top to the bottom. He died till the earth reeled and rocked like a drunk man. He looked up toward heaven, said it's finished, gave up the ghost. They took him down, laid him in Joseph's new tomb. He laid there Friday night, laid there Saturday, but somewhere between Saturday night and Sunday morning, he got up, all power in his hand. Didn't he die? And because Jesus said no to coming down from that cross, God said yes to redemption. He said yes to forgiveness. He said yes to mercy. God said yes to grace. Yes to another chance. Yes to everlasting life. And if Jesus could stay committed to his purpose when the whole world was pulling against him, surely you and I can learn that sometimes you have to say no. No to what steals your peace. No to what drains your strength. No to what compromises your convictions. No to what distracts you from your assignment. No to what keeps pulling you away from God, because there is a yes on your life that is too important to sacrifice. So brothers and sisters, pray until you know your purpose. Know your purpose until you recognize your priorities. Guard your priorities until you could say without guilt, that is not what God called me to do. And then get up, leave Capernaum, and go where God is sending you. Because sometimes you have to say no so you can keep saying yes to God.